West Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. My name is Elham Yaqubian, and I'm honored to be here today and introduce our distinguished guest of today. Before we start our program, I'd love to let you know that this program will be videotaped and photographed. If somebody is not interested to be in the video or pictures, they can choose the back seats and to be safe.
We're proud to be here.
We are proud to be here. I'm happy to hear that. One of the West Los Angeles Chamber's mission is to appreciate, illustrate, and illuminate the intellectual, cultural, and literary part of our society as a component of the social activity by shedding light on those corners of our environment which not intentionally but unfairly are underrepresented within other values we are trying to take care of. In this program, on monthly basis, the writers, thinkers, and literary activists of our community will be introduced and appreciated by our members. Tonight in this program, I feel so special to have privilege to introduce a great friend, a freedom fighter, a political writer, an activist, a New York best-selling author I know for more than a decade. Ken Timmerman is nationally recognized investigative, reporter, and war correspondent who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. He is the founder and executive director of Foundation for Democracy in Iran, an organization that works to support democratic movement in Iran. For the past 30 years, Ken has covered both sides of Arab-Israeli conflict, interviewing radical imams and would-be suicide bombers in Gaza, while reporting on the plight of Israeli citizens during Hezbollah missile attacks of 2006 war. In the day job, Ken helps victims of terrorism fight the state sponsor who murdered their loved ones. What famed Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal said about him is impressive. I've spent my life tracking down the murderers of yesterday. Mr. Timmerman is tracking down the murderers of tomorrow. His latest book, Dark Forces, is a brilliant expose of what actually happened in Benghazi before, during, after the fateful night of September 11, 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Timmerman.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. How many of you have seen the movie 13 Hours? Okay. Well, more of you need to see the movie. And the reason you need to see the movie is because it gives you an excellent viewpoint on the ground of what happened that night. It was a long, long battle. And there are really 6 heroes who saved the lives of 36 other Americans. There are 4 people who lost their lives, but they saved, an awful lot. They saved most of the people who were there. I'm not going to talk so much about the events of the night of September 11th, because that you can see in the movie. I recount some of it here in Dark Forces, but go see the movie. I really strongly recommend that you go see the movie. What I want to do tonight is talk to you about 4 things that have not been widely spoken about in the press, that are not being investigated, as far as I know, by the Benghazi Select Committee, led by Trey Gowdy, and that aren't widely known. And I cover them in my book. The first one I didn't cover in my book. You're going to get this in a second as we get there. But the first one has to do with what I call the smoking gun email that was discovered about a month ago, sent from Hillary Clinton's, sent from the Chief of Staff of Secretary of Defense Panetta to Hillary Clinton's office. Now, why do I call it a smoking gun email? At 7:09 p.m., on the night of the attacks, so it's 1:09 a.m.
Eastern time?
Eastern time, 7:09 p.m. Eastern, 1:09 a.m. in Benghazi. So about an hour after the CIA security guys got back from the diplomatic facility, they'd lost the ambassador, they'd beaten back the first wave of jihadi attacks on the annex, and they're kind of saying, all right, where's the AC-130 Spectre gunship? You know, where's the drone? Where's the this? Where's the that? All right. So the email is sent from Panetta's office, and it starts off like this. It says, hey guys, tried to get you on the phone, guess you're in a meeting, but here are all the assets we've identified that are, quote, spinning up as we speak. And then 2 big paragraphs are blacked out, they're redacted. We know what's in those 2 paragraphs because we know what the military assets were. I do detail in the book. I didn't have the email at the time in the book, but I knew what the assets were. We had available a 40 to 50 man counterterrorism unit known as C-110, Charlie 110. It was the commander's in extremis force for European Command. They were on a mission in Croatia, about a 2-hour flight from Benghazi. 2 hours by C-130, okay? Less in a faster plane. 2 hours in a C-130. At the very beginning of the events, General Carter Ham, who was the commander-in-chief of the Africa Command, they were in charge of Libya. Carter Ham signs a temporary order signing that commander's in extremis force over to him. Now he can do this because he was going to get it permanently a month later. That had already been programmed. So they were all waiting for this to happen. So he said, okay, ship the command over to me, then we're going to be able to deploy it. The guys were throwing their stuff into the plane as of 11 o'clock midnight. And again, remember, they're in Croatia, they're in Europe. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, Chris Peranto, who has friends in that unit, said he told me this a couple weeks ago. He said, I got off the phone with one of them, and they said, we've been told to spin down. Not to spin up, but to spin down. And they basically got out of the plane and went into their ready room and waited and waited and waited. Okay, there were 2 Marine fast companies, which are fast reaction companies, on call in Rota, Spain. Now that was a little bit further away, but they were given orders later to stage to move over to Sigonella, which is in in the boot of Sicily, right? Sigonella is just about a 45-minute flight from Benghazi. There was another unit of special forces in Sigonella. All right, so you had all these different forces, and Jeremy Bash, the Chief of Staff to Secretary of Defense Panetta, said they are spinning up as we speak. And then, lo and behold, they started to spin down. Now, why do I call this?
What time? Because
okay, the email
Eastern.
was sent.
Can you do it Eastern for us?
Eastern. This email was sent at 7:09 p.m. And there was never an answer that we know of, or that's been released. There was never an answer from the State Department.
Okay.
Okay. So here's why this is important, and this is why it's a smoking gun email. All right.
What day was this?
This is the night of September 11th in Washington, 7:09 Eastern Washington time.
And what was the exact time that the attack started?
The attack started at 3:42 Washington time. 3:42 p.m. Washington time.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a couple of hours later, but government, guys were getting ready. They were getting their stuff, throwing their stuff into airplanes. But to get the order signed takes a little bit longer. The verbal orders had already gone out.
And Panetta had been at the White House at 5 p.m.
Panetta
he was on his way.
Panetta had been at the office at the White House with General Dempsey, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, on a previously scheduled briefing for the president. And of course, once they learn what's going on, they get briefed going down to their car to go so they can give the president the update on what happens. And from what we understand of that meeting, President Obama said basically, okay, do whatever you have to do. Because I got a fundraiser tomorrow in Las Vegas, I'm not going to be here, so you're in charge. Basically, do what you have to do. All right. Now, perhaps another president would have acted differently and would himself have taken charge of the effort. But I do not believe that Obama's reaction, do what you have to do, caused the stand down. I don't think so. I think what he was essentially saying, go ahead and do what you have to do. You've got my authority to do what you need to do. So when Panetta then sends the email over to Hillary Clinton's office saying, all of these assets are spinning up, and never gets a response, that was the stand down, and here's why. She owned the facilities in Benghazi. They were under State Department authority. Both the CIA annex, why is it called an annex? Because it is annexed to the diplomatic compound. So she owned both of those facilities. She had to authorize forces to come and rescue the people who were there on the ground, and she did not do so. The stand-down order came from the Secretary of State first. Let me give you one other fact in that mix. General Carter Ham, in 2013, was called to testify before the Armed Services Committee in the House. His testimony.
What was the reason she didn't want it?
Hold on just a second. Carter Ham was called to testify in 2013 in the Armed Services Committee. And he was asked in a classified briefing, they later declassified most of it. He said, why didn't you go and send forces? And his answer, I personally think is pathetic, but his answer on the record is, quote, because we were never asked. Because we were never asked. Now, you fit that in the context of that, what I call the smoking gun email, you begin to understand. Panetta was asking the Secretary of State for approval, and she just never gave the approval. They could not go into the diplomatic compound or the CIA annex without the authority of the Secretary of State. She never gave her authority to do that. Okay, you ask me why. What was her reason? I don't like to psychoanalyze political leaders. I like to lay out the facts, and then we can all kind of try to piece them together as we wish. We can analyze them together, and then you can have your opinions. I can tell you what some of the security officers working on the ground in Tripoli, specifically, and I quote him in the book extensively, Colonel Andy Wood, who was the head of the 18-man Green Beret group they called the Site Security Team, guarding the ambassador. He was there with his 18 special forces guys until August 6th, 2012. And then the State Department told him to leave. We don't need you anymore. Everything's under control, and oh, by the way, we don't want any boots on the ground. And he said specifically he was told by the diplomats, and not by Chris Stevens, but by, they were going up the channels. He was told quite specifically that when he went out with his men to protect the ambassador around Tripoli for his meetings, they were not allowed to wear their uniforms. Not only were they not allowed to wear their uniforms, they couldn't even wear their boots because Mrs. Clinton did not want boots on the ground. And he's, again, quoting from Andy Woods, the rationale was, we are not the Bush administration. We did not come in here to occupy Libya. We came in here to liberate Libya. They are our friends. So we do not need boots on the ground. We are not an occupying force. Okay. This was well known in the military. By the way, Andy Wood is not the only guy who told me that. I also talked to a number of different people in Stuttgart, in AFRICOM headquarters, the African Command headquarters. They said exactly the same thing. General Ham met with Chris Stevens in the beginning of September, when Stevens was on vacation just before he came back to Tripoli. And again, he offered, he said, look, I can give you these guys back. I can give you that 18-man security team, no problem. I'll pay for it. You don't even have to pay for it. And he said, General, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You know I need it, but you know that my hierarchy would kill me if I asked for it.
Was that his line? would kill me.
They
sure did.
They would have my head. I gotta say, I think he said something to the effect, it would not be a career-enhancing move for me to request the renewal of the site security team. Okay. So that's the first thing, and you're not that doesn't get an awful lot of play. I wrote a column about some of this in Front Page Magazine, where I write from time to time. I think it's a tremendously important piece of the puzzle because we finally know who is responsible for the real stand-down order, the ultimate stand-down order.
But she never responded.
And she's never acknowledged this.
But you know she got it?
She's never acknowledged this, and unfortunately, for reasons which are beyond me, Trey Gowdy and the committee never asked her when she was there. And I honestly don't understand why, and they had the email.
She said it wasn't her job.
All right.
The emails that she got that they found in her email at her home?
This particular email was, you know, I don't know for certain if this was found on the State Department server or on her server, but it was turned over to the Benghazi Committee about a year ago, but made public about a month ago, 4 to 6 weeks ago. Okay.
So since she used her own server, did she always check the State Department's emails, or did it get?
She never used the State Department.
She
server,
never did.
Period. She
so
did
she
not.
could claim she never got this.
She didn't. Well, her people got it. Okay. There's everybody. No,
Cheryl
they
Mills.
got it.
Cheryl Mills would have got
Cheryl
it.
Mills would have got
somebody would have
it.
gotten it.
Exactly. And she never had. Hillary Clinton never had a state.gov email address.
Right.
Right.
Unbelievable. All right. Second thing. Yeah, so there's going to be 4 things I'm going to tell you about that aren't widely known. The YouTube video, the famous YouTube video, right? At 10:08 p.m., September 11th, Washington time, the State Department puts out a statement from the Secretary blaming the attacks on an offensive video out on YouTube. All right? It's very clear. And as you know, this has been discussed ad infinitum. The next day, the President mentioned it. All week long, the spokesperson at the White House was talking about the YouTube video. Susan Rice went that weekend on the Sunday talk shows. And on the 24th of September, 12 days after the attacks, the President went to the United Nations and said this hateful YouTube video that caused the attacks. Well, there's some very strange things about the YouTube video. And I'm doing some new research on that I'm not ready to publish yet, but it will come out in a number of months. It was uploaded to the internet in July of 2012. Got about 200 hits. Nobody cared. It's a very poor quality, amateurish production that takes events from the life of the leader of Islam, the founder of Islam, Muhammad, and caricatures that. But the actual events are, you know, pretty accurate according to people who have actually looked at the whole script. But it's a caricature, and it's clearly not a positive. It is not intended to show Muhammad in a positive light. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Nobody cared. Nobody watched it. Nobody saw it. They had a showing down at Hollywood and Vine in July. Maybe 6 people came. Maybe. All right. Not sure that even 6 showed up. All right. It was a non-event. All of a sudden on September 8th, there's a preacher, an imam in Cairo, who gets wind of this, and he talks about it. And then they excerpt a piece of it and dub it into Arabic and put it on Egyptian television on the 8th or the 9th of September. When that gets shown, suddenly there's several 100,000 people who start to watch the video. And in Egypt, it did become an object of controversy. And so on September 11th, 2012, there were 2 events in front of the U.S. Embassy in Egypt, not in Libya. The ambassador, by the way, knew of those events. They had been warned of them ahead of time. And she knew that one of them was going to be violent because it was planned by the brother of the leader of Al-Qaeda, who was in Egypt. And he was calling on his followers to come to the embassy to burn it down. Stay home. Don't come in on September 11th. It's too dangerous. We're just going to have the Marine Guards there. But then she told the Marine Guards not to put ammunition in their clips. So you had a demonstration in Egypt that was loosely tied to the video. You had a second demonstration in front of the U.S. Embassy that was organized by the brother of the blind sheikh, who's in jail in this country for trying to blow up the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, back in 1994. And they scaled the embassy walls in Cairo late that afternoon, around 5:30, 6 p.m., 7 o'clock, I think, and hoisted the black flag of Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, back in Libya, nothing. Absolutely zero. It's calm outside the Benghazi Special Mission, the Special Mission compound where the ambassador is. He stayed home all day. He was told, don't go out. It's September 11th. You know, you never know, something might come up. He stays home, and the attacks begin out of the blue, or I should say out of the darkness, at 9:42 p.m. An organized group of about 30 to 40 armed individuals, right, with Kalashnikovs, with RGB-7s. It was an attack from the beginning. It was not. There was never a protest, and they knew there was not a protest. Okay, never even a pretense of a protest. Now, here's the thing. So 10:08. Let's go back to the chronology. 10:08 p.m. Washington time. Mrs. Clinton puts out a statement blaming a YouTube video. That, by the way, there is nothing in the State Department records that have been released so far that shows that there was reporting about a video or a demonstration in Benghazi. She made it up whole cloth. Maybe she associated what was happening in Cairo and applied it to Libya. We don't know. But we know this, and these things are new. At about 11:30 p.m., she emails her daughter.
Yes.
On her private email server, and her daughter has a pseudonym. She's called Diana Reynolds. Okay, she doesn't use her real name. So, email to Diana Reynolds. Coming home shortly. Our diplomatic facility has been attacked in Benghazi by Al-Qaeda, or by groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Not, oh, there was a demonstration that went bad. Oh, they're worried about a YouTube video. No, she says to her daughter, the compound was attacked by groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda. So she knew right then that the YouTube video story was a lie. The next day, she has conversations with the Prime Minister of Egypt and the President of Libya. Those transcripts have been released to the Benghazi Select Committee, and during the hearing she was asked about those transcripts, because in both of those conversations she said explicitly, we understand the attack in Benghazi had nothing to do with the YouTube video. Nothing to do with the YouTube video. And she said it to both the Prime Minister of Egypt and to the President of Libya. So, you had this, what I call it the original spin. The original spin was to blame everything on a YouTube video because in many ways it was convenient for the administration and for their agenda, which involved going along with blasphemy laws that prevented this so-called slander of religion. The administration, with Mrs. Clinton leading the way, had gone to the United Nations the year before. They'd gotten a General Assembly declaration, 1618, that essentially adopted the blasphemy laws of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So this kind of fit in with the narrative, if you wish, that they're really horrible people in the United States. We have these religious bigots, you know, they hate Islam and they're saying awful, terrible things. We shouldn't allow it and they should go to jail. Now, speaking of going to jail, no, not Hillary, not yet. Speaking of going to jail, when the bodies were brought back to Dover Air Force Base, a couple days later, Mrs. Clinton is there with the President. They meet with Tyrone Woods' father, Charles Woods. And I met with Charles and He's told me this story himself, personally. And she said, oh, so sorry for your loss, but we're going to get the guy who's responsible for your son's death. He said, oh, great, who's that? He said, he's a video maker out in California, and we're going to get him. And she said that to some of the other...
Mrs. Smith, I think. Mrs. Sean Smith's mother.
Sean Smith's mother as well. All right. Now, of course, a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Clinton was asked about this on one of the national news programs. He said, oh, no, I never said that at all.
Yeah.
So, do you believe Mrs. Clinton, or do you believe two parents of two Navy SEALs who were murdered in Benghazi? Right. And of course, the filmmaker was arrested 2 weeks later on a so-called parole violation. Was essentially coerced into a plea bargain with the federal government, and was put away for a year. So he was taken off the streets, so nobody could talk to him, nobody could get his story, nobody could find out what his video was all about or anything else. One more thing I want to say about the video that's not well known is that, remember I told you in the beginning, there were 200 hits when it was first uploaded by the filmmaker, then started to get a couple 100,000 hits when the Egyptian television picked it up. As of about the 12th of September, the day afterwards, it suddenly appeared on a brand new YouTube channel called News Politics Now. And News Politics Now broadcast it around the world. They got 4 million hits in about 3 or 4 days, 17 million hits over the next 2 weeks, and then the channel just disappeared. Its work done. We don't know who News Politics Now is. There's been speculation in the media that it may be associated with a government contractor that works for the CIA and the State Department. I've not been able to corroborate that, but that's one of the things that I am looking into.
Did the video maker ever speak, or no?
Let me just kind of hold that for myself for the time being, and let you know that there will be more to this story. Okay, there will be more to this story. Okay. Now, the tall tale about the video is the original spin. But there was an original sin in Benghazi as well, and that came earlier, and that had to do with arms smuggling.
Yes.
That's what the story is really all about. It's all about arms smuggling.
Yeah, Iran and Syria and the rebels.
Arms smuggling.
Yeah.
And it's arms smuggling I mean, you'd be astonished when you go through this book. You're not going to believe the kind of stuff that was going on. It was smuggling weapons into Libya in the beginning. We helped smuggle through the Qatari Special Forces Stinger missiles into Libya. Stinger missiles into Libya at the beginning of the conflict. And then the Qataris lost control of them. And how do we know this? Because one of them wound up in Afghanistan. It shot down a U.S. military helicopter in July of 2012, and it hit a U.S. helicopter, did not explode. The helicopter crash landed, and they recovered a piece of the missile that included the serial number, and the serial number came from a lot that had been signed out to the CIA, signed out by the CIA, and handed over to the Qataris. Okay. Anyhow, that story's here in the book. It's an amazing story. Nobody has ever touched it yet. I've asked Trey Gowdy, why don't you go after that? And his people say, well, it's too highly classified.
So those came from Qatar and not from Iran?
Iran is coming. Iran is coming. Don't you worry. Iran is coming. The Stinger missiles came from Qatar. Yes. And then they bled away. They disappeared into jihadi land. Okay. Now, they're not the only missiles that disappeared in jihadi land. Remember, you may have heard that Gaddafi had 20,000 man pads. These are shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles. And the United States boasted, Anthony Shapiro, who was at the State Department in charge of the effort of collecting those weapons, trying to get them off the street. He boasted in February of 2012 that we think we've recovered or identified 15,000 of them. And that's pretty good. We got 15 out of the 20,000. So if you look at it from another way, that means the 5,000 surface-to-air missiles that are still missing, right? 5,000. Well, at least 400, and I think 800, but at least 400 of those missiles wound up in the hands of a guy named Abdul Karim Belhaj, who became the head of the Tripoli Military Council. He was a friend of Chris Stevens. He was a friend of John McCain, who called him a great freedom fighter, even though he had been in detained by U.S. forces in Afghanistan early on in the war against terror, 2001-2002, and transferred to Libya. He was an Al-Qaeda member. Belhaj played a very big role in the Libyan revolution against Gaddafi, overthrowing Gaddafi, and then he went and rounded up some of these missiles, sent them down through the south of Libya to Agadez in Niger, which is remember the arms market in Star Wars? Well, that's what it was. Only it's the real thing. Okay, they were there. This was it was the arms market in Africa. You know, people were selling all kinds of stuff, and what they wound up doing was taking the Libyan missiles, which were green, the long tubes were green, and modernizing them, upgrading them with batteries that they got. CIA produced batteries for the Soviet missiles, the Soviet era missiles, and grip stocks, which are the actual launch part of the device. They got those from Egypt, brought in through the Muslim Brotherhood, and then they went out. Once they were refurbished and reassembled, they went out into jihadi land. They've turned up in Gaza, they've turned up in Sinai, they've turned up in Mali, they've turned up all over the place, okay? The Israeli Air Force has, I asked a very good friend of mine who's a very senior security official in Israel, and he told me, yeah, we've encountered them in Gaza, but we have countermeasures. All right, so they haven't shot down any Israeli aircraft, but they have been used against Israeli aircraft. Now, I have pictures on my website at kentimmerman.com that show you this very unusual missile, you know, part green, part brown. And go and take a look at other missiles that are in the hands of the Syrian, the Free Syrian Army and jihadi groups in Syria, the Nusra Front and others, exactly the same missiles. They came out from Libya, upgraded with U.S. assistance, U.S. parts, and then went out into jihadi land. Now, one of my sources in this book is a former CIA deputy station chief from Baghdad. He got wind of this going on, and he said, "Oh, this has got to be bad. It's really got to be bad." And he knew General Petraeus, who at that point was the CIA director. And so he set up to have. He told Petraeus, "Look, something really bad is going down, and involves these man pads. I know you guys want to clean them up and take them off the streets. Would you have some time so I can come in and brief you?" He said, "Absolutely. Come on in next week." So he comes to Washington, going to go brief the CIA director, and all of a sudden, he's shut out of the building. Shut out of the building entirely. Never gets to turn over the information. He believes, and again, he believes that this was a U.S. government authorized operation.
Yeah.
And it was perhaps not under CIA, under the CIA umbrella.
Not under.
Not under the CIA
And
umbrella.
that's why the
So why'd
CIA
they shun it?
compound.
So
Now
why
it
did they
makes
shut him away if there wasn't?
Because the CIA did not want to know about it.
Oh.
Because once they knew about it, they would have to report to Congress.
sense. So it didn't exist.
So it didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
It did
It
not
was
exist.
one of those, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Off the books. An off the books operation that he stumbled upon.
Blumenthal?
No. I think close to the White House.
Okay.
All right.
Wow. That's
Missiles were then going out of Libya to jihadis, including to the Syrian rebels. As I say, you can find those photos on the internet, and some of them are on my website, and they're immediately identifiable. You won't see missiles like that anywhere else. Right? The green tubes and the brown ripstocks and batteries, made by the CIA, designed by the CIA. Very specially designed. Yes, sir.
Did the Qataris have something to do with this?
I don't think the Qataris were involved in this one. The Qataris helped bring the Stingers in, but I don't think they were involved in this part of the smuggling. The Qataris were involved in the Benghazi-based smuggling operation, which is the reason that Chris Stevens went to Benghazi on September 11th. I'll just do this as a parenthesis before I go into the last point here. In August, there was a ship called the Entisar, filled with 400 tons of weapons from Benghazi, taken out of Gaddafi's stockpile. that went to Iskenderun in Turkey, intended for the Syrian rebels. Okay. Once it got to Iskenderun, all hell broke loose. And you had Muslim Brotherhood groups fighting with al-Nusra, with all these different jihadi groups were squabbling, violently so, over who was going to get the weapons. It was a lot. 400 tons is pretty good. And a couple of reporters got wind of this, went down there, and that was reported back up the chain of command. General Petraeus, CIA directors, said, okay, I'm going to Ankara to see if I can straighten it out. He made a, quote, secret trip to Ankara on the 1st and 2nd of September 2012, which obviously was no longer secret because I know about it now, and it was revealed later on. And he couldn't get it under control. So who was the guy who knew, who was our ambassador to Al-Qaeda? Christopher Stevens. He was our ambassador to Al-Qaeda. He was the guy who knew all the Al-Qaeda leaders. He used to visit them in jail when they were in Gaddafi's jails. He spent his Christmas day in 2007 when he was the DCM, the number 2 at the embassy in Tripoli. He spent his Christmas day in 2007 meeting with Sufyan bin Kumu, who was the founder of Ansar al-Sharia, the very group that murdered him 5 years later. All right. So he was our ambassador to Al-Qaeda. So when there was a problem with a shipment, who do you call? You call the guy who knows the bad guys. You know, our guy who knows the bad guys, and that was Chris Stevens. And that's why he was sent to Benghazi. He was sent there to put a lid on it, to get control on it. I don't think he was sent there to enable armed shipments to the Syrian rebels. I think he was there to actually try to shut it down or at least get it under control. They didn't want a public relations disaster 6 weeks before the presidential election. Yeah.
So, if Petraeus secretly went to Turkey, but the meeting prior to the event was with the Turkish
Consul General,
and the operation didn't exist, it was not part of the CIA. So who would have arranged the meeting with the Turkish consul prior to 3:42 in the afternoon?
Okay, I communicated with him, and he claims that Stevens contacted him directly because they knew each other.
Okay.
They knew each other, all right? But why would he go see the Turkish Consul General?
Right.
Okay.
Especially if Petraeus...
And by the way, when you go, as I did, and you look at the the resume of this particular Consul General, he was an intelligence officer. Okay. He was an MIT officer. He was a Turkish intelligence officer. It's absolutely crystal clear. All right. So he was there, also dealing with jihadi groups, and trying to get a handle on the arms smuggling going out of Benghazi through Turkey to the Syrian rebels.
So they were actually working together.
Yes.
He was not privy to what was going to happen next.
I don't think he was privy. I don't think he was privy to what was going to happen. He considered himself a friend of Chris Stevens, and I think that he probably would have said something.
They portrayed that in the movie.
Yeah, I think he probably would have said something if he had sensed that something was going to happen. All right. Now. The fourth point that I want to bring up that has gotten zero coverage, is the involvement of the Islamic Republic of Iran Quds Force in the attacks. Now, I got wind of this really early on during the Libyan civil war. A friend of mine who was a defense contractor was in Benghazi, and he started sending me these text messages and then emails, and then he called me a couple of times. He said, Ken, the Iranians are all over here. I said, what do you mean the Iranians are all over there? He said, the Iranians are all over here, and they're working with a certain faction of the rebel groups.
17 martyrs?
I said, you got to be kidding. No. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, yeah, they're all over the place. I said, okay. So I started to pull on threads, talk to sources, and talk to different people. Two different Iranian defectors who I know very well. I've worked with in the past, who I know have good information, who do not know each other, do not have contact with each other. Each of them had heard pieces of the story through their sources in Iran. Pieces of the story. One of them, for example, knew that the The head of the Iranian base in Benghazi was a Revolutionary Guards officer named Mohammed Judaki. Great, okay, that's not bad. The other guy did not know that. And I said, he never mentioned his name. I said, okay, Judaki. So then I took the name, and I put that in front of my U.S. intelligence contacts, people who had access to databases and things like that. They know exactly who the guy was, and his position in the Quds Force, and they also knew that he was in Benghazi. They also knew that he was in Benghazi. A second name that popped out was Khalil Harb. Khalil Harb is a Lebanese. He's a Hezbollah guy, a Hezbollah military commander. He was the liaison on the ground with the Libyans. Why? Because he's an Arab. He's not a Persian, right? He's not Iranian. He's an Arab. Easier for him to, get along personally with the Libyans, who are Arabs and not Persians, and who might not want to be talking to somebody they think is a Shia Muslim rather than a Sunni Muslim. Okay. Another source gave me a wire transfer document which showed money coming from a known Iranian money launderer named Babak Zanjani.
Baba, what's the first name?
Babak Zanjani. And a guy who was very, very well known, laundered billions of dollars for the regime in oil money. Okay.
That was in Turkey though, right?
No, he was based in Malaysia. And he sent money from his accounts in Malaysia through a bank in Europe to a quote-unquote real estate company in Benghazi. He sent several wire transfers, somewhere between $30 and $50 million altogether. And that money was used to recruit, Ansar al-Sharia, to create this new militia, to train them, to equip them, to arm them, and then ultimately to send them off for their mission, which was to attack the U.S. Embassy. The other name that was given to me was the big guy. I call him Mr. Chops in the book. His name was Mehdi Rabbani. Mehdi Rabbani is a two-star general. There are not very many of them in the Revolutionary Guards. There are very few of them in the Revolutionary Guards. And he, I believe, that he came with an operations group of Quds Force officers under cover of a Red Crescent medical and humanitarian team. Himself. And I have their photos on my website. You go check out the photos on my website. Okay, go take a look at those. All right, take a look at his pictures and take a look at the Red Crescent team. Now, this gets. Let me tell you the story here. It gets a little bit complicated, so stay with me here. All right, you've got 7 Iranians, doctors, humanitarians, coming from Tripoli. They arrive in Benghazi on the 31st of July, 2012. 31st of July. That night, they're at a Ramadan dinner and an iftar dinner, come back to the hotel about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're being followed by the CIA people, okay? Because they knew that the CIA base was all over them. They knew that they were coming. They knew they were bad. They had reporting on this. They had something like 50 to 60 intelligence reports on what the Iranians were doing in Benghazi, okay? The Iranian teams were on the radar of the CIA. Of that CIA base. Absolutely. Okay? They knew. And they knew they were bad, and they knew they were coming. They didn't know what they were going to do. So our guys are tailing them, and a couple hundred meters away from the hotel, all of a sudden these gun trucks come out of nowhere. And once you see the movie 13 Hours, you'll understand how this happens in Benghazi. The gun trucks came out of nowhere, set up a roadblock, kidnap, air quotes here, kidnap the 7-man Quds Force team posing as doctors and take them away. Or take them off the streets.
What date is this?
This is the 31st of July.
Okay.
31st of July. 31st of July. Okay. Now, here's what really happened. And I know this again from my Iranian sources and from, I've been able to corroborate this with American sources as well. Here's what really happened. Is that the Iranians were into our comms. They had the frequencies of the radios that our guys were using, and they were listening to us all the time. They knew that we knew who they were. So, right? They said, oh, the Americans have figured out who we are. Well, let's see what we can do. And they pulled off a magnificent deception. An operation intended to deceive the CIA base. Kidnapped, taken off the streets by Sunni extremists who didn't like Shias. Right, that was the story. That was the cover story that was told. And they completely disappeared. They completely disappeared until October 6th, well after the attacks. Right? Now, in the meantime, there's one of the security guys who was at the diplomatic facility claims that there was an effort to go rescue them by the CIA annex. I'm not sure that that's true or not, but he had a source who was close to the militia that had captured them, Ansar al-Sharia, by the way, just to make it nice and coincidental, who told him, no, they've been released already, no need. So it was a double, triple deception. And essentially what happened, they were taken off the streets, they went to their buddies, Ansar al-Sharia, who were preparing the attack on the U.S. diplomatic facility and the CIA annex, and they were able to beaver away in quiet with nobody watching. And Mr. Chops said, okay, the operation's a go. As soon as the ambassador comes, the operation's a go. So they waited until the ambassador came, and then you had Iranian Quds Force officers who were actually supervising the attack. You know, they had cell phones and walkie-talkies. They were in the building across the street. They were supervising the attack, watching what was going on, making sure that, you know, things happened. And then later on, at 5 o'clock in the morning, after several waves of attackers had been beaten back by 6 guys on the roof, or 6 plus a couple of staties, so 9 guys up on the roof. They themselves, the Iranians themselves, launched the mortars that killed Ty Woods and Glenn Darden. Now, I say that with a pretty high degree of confidence for the following reasons. First, none of the Libyan militia groups had any experience using mortars. They didn't use mortars. They really didn't. The Libyan military didn't have any experience with mortars. I mean, the Gaddafi military didn't have any experience with mortars. People who are U.S. Mortar operators have told me it is not a simple thing to get 3 shots on target out of 5. You have to dial in mortars, you have to have accurate coordinates, and it takes a little bit to walk in the mortars and to get them on target. In this case, the first shot went long, the second shot went short, and the next 2 were right on target and killed Glenn Darden and Ty Woods. And the 5th, I forget where the 5th hit. It hit someplace else in the compound. So they had 3 out of 5 right on target. That is the action of an experienced mortar operator. The Iranians are fantastic mortar operators. They had lots of experience during the Iran-Iraq War. They shot off so much munitions that they had to create a cartel in Europe to make sure that they had enough gunpowder to supply both Iran and Iraq during that 8-year war. It was a story I covered many, many years ago. 10 different companies with all of their gunpowder explosives plants around Europe. They had to divvy up the contracts. They were blowing off hundreds of thousands of rounds of munitions every month. I mean, just huge quantities. They were experienced mortarmen. And it was the people who killed Glenn Darden and Ty Woods were experienced mortarmen. So those are the 4 things I wanted to kind of lay out on the table, and we can open it up for questions. The smoking gun email, the bit about the YouTube video, the smuggling into and out of Iran, and finally the direct Iranian military involvement in the attacks. Okay. Yes.
Would you care to address the notion the deal, the swap deal, that Ambassador Stevens was supposed to have been kidnapped, and that it was a setup? That's why everyone was asked to stand down? They were hoping to do that to release
The blind sheikh.
Exactly.
Yeah. There is a story that has been circulated that there was a deal essentially negotiated by the White House to exchange the ambassador for the blind sheikh. I've not been able to corroborate that. I've not been able to corroborate that story at this point. My understanding from the people that I've spoken to who were there that night is that there was never a serious effort to actually kidnap the ambassador. And you'll see if you watch 13 Hours, you'll see that they kind of rattled the cage, basically. They rattled the cage, but they didn't really attempt to shoot out the locks, not seriously. And instead, they poured the diesel fuel underneath. So if you're going to kidnap the ambassador, you don't want to turn him into French toast first. Right. Not a very good.
If you want to make a hostage.
Not very good. He's not a hostage if he's dead.
Yeah.
But isn't that just one narrative that the filmmakers chose to take because they avoided lots of other political issues in the film, would you say?
Yeah, the filmmakers didn't go into that. No.
They didn't.
No, they didn't go into that.
Yeah.
But that is a story that's been out there. I've not been able to corroborate it. There may be something to it because I continue to hear bits and pieces about that. So to be continued. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, this is a piece for your puzzle, and then I have a question. Leon Panetta came to Los Angeles, and he had an event in Beverly Hills, and I read his book. And my question, because I worked for a senator that was a very close friend of his, so he was predisposed to speak candidly, and he's kind of candid by his nature.
Yes, he is.
He's a wonderful man. And so I asked him at 4:32 in the afternoon, when you were in the car with General Dempsey and you heard about this, what did you think? What was your instinct? And he said, well, he said our instinct was to call in, every force that we could. And he said it. He was not prevaricating. He was not making anything up. He was not trying to hide anything. He was a regular Italian, Catholic, American guy.
Gung-ho.
Gung-ho, I gotta save my Americans, I don't care if it exists or doesn't. It was very authentic, very true. I tell you this because you can't make that up.
Right.
I mean, he couldn't make it up, especially on the spot.
And I think you're right, by the way. I think
yes,
you're right about that.
very, very honest, good-natured, wanted to do the right thing. Now, my question, the February 17th martyrs. Chris Peranto had always implied that the State Department, meaning Mrs. Clinton, had hired them to protect both compounds, but that they were the ones that were bought off by the Coods?
Unclear.
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 Okay.
But the February 17th Martyr Brigade, who had the contract to be the local security guards at both facilities, they were on strike.
Okay.
They've been on strike for a couple of days, and the ambassador actually, when he arrived on the 10th, he met with them and tried to, he tried to do what he could to get them back to work. But they were being paid $28 a day to go stave off a jihadi attack. They were on strike. They wanted more pay, and they were not very happy.
Paid by whom?
What?
Paid by whom?
Us. They were paid by the United States State Department.
My question, Hillary's budget. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the State Department budget. Okay, they were paid.
But they're the ones that turned, according to...
They did not defend the compounds.
Right.
Clear. They walked away, and then some of them joined the group that attacked.
Oh, I see.
Okay, some of them joined the group that attacked.
And then some remained faithful.
A couple.
Yeah.
A couple, and you see that in the movie. A couple of them go with Chris Peranto and Silva to the back, and they go in through the rear. Okay, but they were, they were guns for hire. But they were not the ones who coordinated the attack. It was Ansar al-Sharia that coordinated the attack. And Ansar al-Sharia, again, was created by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yes, sir.
Did Secretary Clinton, was she ever asked where she was the rest of that night? Has she ever identified what she was doing the rest of that night?
My understanding is she was in the State Department until something like midnight or 1 p.m. and then went home. That's my understanding, but I could be wrong about that. But she was definitely there in the critical hours when help was being organized, and help could have been on the way, and help was shut down. She was definitely there at that point.
So Panetta got it all going, and then...
Panetta got it going. Panetta spun up the assets, which is what he was supposed to be doing.
I
Okay?
can tell, it's true.
He spun up the assets, and he said, let's get everything going, guys. And by the way, here's what happens, and this was explained to me by a number of different people who you know, have been in various security positions at U.S. embassies around the world, both in intelligence and actual physical security. When an event like this happens, it blasted out over the entire national security communications network. All right? Every military outpost, every U.S. military outpost in the world knew that the compounds were under attack in Benghazi. And everybody who was within range was saying to themselves and to their commanding officers, "Gee, okay, I can go, we can go, come on, we can do this." Because that's the way Americans are. That's the way Americans are in the military. Our military guys were ready to go. So you had pilots in Aviano who were in their cockpits of F-16s to do low-level flybys. You had people with the AC Spectre gunships. You had the C-110, that counterterrorism unit that was in Serbia. They were all getting their gear together. They were ready to go because that's what we do. That's what we do.
Ken, if you were going to do an organizational flow chart of the security forces at the Annex and Chris Stevens' staff right there, how would that look from that level just above them, and how high up would it go? Would that, if you were to do that on that whiteboard right there, put
who's in command?
Yeah, in other words, when you do the flow chart, you know how these things go.
The ambassador's in command of everything in country. So he actually has command over the CIA Annex, even though he's not...
So Stevens is above, and these security forces...
But he's obviously not making the
well, that's right. Who goes above Stevens?
No, he's not making the nitty-gritty decisions on security issues. That's what he's got the CIA chief of base. Under him is the team leader of the GRS. They are the contract security officer, the former Navy SEALs, the Rangers, the Marines, right? So it goes, if you wish, from the security point of view, it's the CIA chief of base, then it's the team leader of the GRS support staff, and then it's the actual guys.
But I want the flow chart above that. What is above that?
So the CIA chief of base reports to the CIA station chief in Tripoli. The CIA station chief in Tripoli reports back to Washington, you know, to the Middle East operations desk. Okay, and then ultimately that gets kicked up to the deputy director, Morell, who was in Europe, and he was traveling at the time, he was not in Washington, and then kicked up to the director, General Petraeus.
Okay, so when Hillary says it's not her job, she's not on that flow chart at all?
She
says it's not her job.
She is not
security.
Okay, she is not on the security flow chart per se. Okay, she's not there to make decisions about how many lights to put up, how many bullets to have, and whatever. However, there are two very important things. Number one, she owns the facilities. She's Secretary of State. She owns the facilities. She's ultimately responsible for those facilities. And number two, and this gets neglected sometimes, following the Africa embassy bombings by Al-Qaeda in 1998, when two of our embassies were blown up simultaneously in 1998, there was an earlier ARB, Accountability Review Board, at the State Department. And that Accountability Review Board set up new standards of accountability and also security for our embassies overseas to prevent this kind of attack. All right? One of the new measures of accountability was a legal requirement that the Secretary of State in person authorize a substandard diplomatic, a facility overseas with substandard security. That the Secretary had to in person sign a waiver saying, okay, I understand the security at this facility is not up to our standards, but it is so important for our national interest and for our purposes in Libya, I authorize it. We know that she never signed that waiver. She never did it. She claims she didn't know about it. It was the law. Okay, and you have a legal counselor at the State Department who is there to tell the Secretary of State, things like that.
Cheryl Mills, too.
No, it's not Cheryl Mills. You had a legal
Another one?
counselor who's responsible. Yes, sir.
But doesn't Hillary have control of the Diplomatic Security Service?
Absolutely. You bet.
Why weren't they there?
They were there, but they were not there in great numbers. There were 3 of them in Benghazi and 2 who flew in with the ambassador from Tripoli. So there are 5 altogether. The ambassador's body man grabbed him by the pool and dragged him into the house, and then told him to put on his body armor, and they got into the safe haven. Gave him a pistol, and things were going out of control. That you see in the movie, for example, David Ubben, he was using a shotgun, sidearms and a shotgun. They had been asked a couple weeks earlier. One of their security contractors in Benghazi had said, "Hey, what you really need is a 50 caliber machine gun on the roof of the villa." And they said, the diplomatic security guy said, "Well, yeah, but we're never going to get that approved."
Oh.
No, but they knew it. They knew it. Because we are not the George W. Bush administration. We're not occupying Libya. We are here without boots on the ground. These are our friends. We don't have to defend ourselves from our friends. That was the attitude. That was the mindset. Yes, sir.
You've obviously done a lot of research and there have been countless investigations, but so far Hillary has kind of squirmed her way out of it. Whether she gets the nomination or not, what do you think is the next step? Where is all this going to go? Is there going to be any consequence to what she has and is not done? Or?
Well, ultimately, it's up to you as the voters to determine if there are going to be consequences for this. I mean, seriously, it's up to the voters to determine this. Obviously, the problem with that is that information is not getting through the filters of the national media. And that's a really huge problem. It is not getting through the filters of the national media. Mrs. Clinton was on the talk shows last Sunday. She wasn't asked once about the email scandal. She wasn't asked about Benghazi. And she wasn't asked about the FBI investigation of corruption at the Clinton Foundation, where she was essentially giving out favors for contributions. So, it's up to us ultimately at the voting booth to hold her accountable, but if we don't have information to start. So part of what we're doing tonight is I'm here to give you some information. Yes, sir, and then Roxanne.
Are
Yes,
you
sir.
intimating that she was authorized to sign this document, she was asked to sign it, and didn't refuse to do it?
No, what I'm saying is that she was not authorized to sign it. She was compelled to sign it legally.
Same thing,
Okay, she was compelled to sign it, but she just said, "Oh, I never saw it." She claims that she never saw it and didn't know anything about it.
And with the 11-hour investigation by the subcommittee a few weeks ago, none of this was ever raised. You were the only one who was able to obtain this information?
That was raised at earlier hearings, but never directly with her. And I don't know why they didn't raise it. I do not know why they didn't raise it. And by the way, other people have asked that question of them. Frankly, with a few notable exceptions, I did not think the committee was performed very well in that hearing. Roxy?
Okay, Ken, I know you know, but for people who don't, Iran's fingers are all over everything that we've seen in terrorism, a lot of it. And now with this new sanctions being removed and all this, and the next day Ms. Clinton says that we need to maybe impose other kinds of sanctions soon. How do you see that money that's being released to a terrorist government come back here to bite us all and have San Bernardinos and 9/11s? And when in Los Angeles just this year we had people with in Ashura with the Games, bloodying themselves up and threatening that next year they're going to be on Westwood doing the same thing. And for FBI and CIA to just be aware of all that's going on in all these mosques that are mushrooming and closing their eyes on it. How do you see our national security in this country now with the release of this big, huge amounts of money to Iran?
Ironically, Secretary Kerry, who negotiated the nuclear deal and the release of $100 billion cash and another $50 billion of other assets, Secretary Kerry himself has acknowledged that they will use the Iranian regime is going to use this money for their terrorist aims. He's admitted this. And okay, so they're going to do that. We know that. We know they're bad guys. Yeah, and that's a reason why we should be doing it, is because we know that they will use the money for terrorism.
To kill us.
That's a good reason to actually do this. It ought to be a reason not to do it. So go find the logic in all of that. Obviously, the FBI is aware of these problems. They have several hundred cases open of terrorist networks that they're tracking in the United States, including many of them run by the Iranians or by Hezbollah. Remember with the so-called hostage trade? So 4 American hostages are released, not Bob Levinson, the former FBI agent, but 4 hostages are released. And we released how many people? 21 Iranians who were in separate cases. These were not all guys in one case. In 21, I think there's only 3 of them in one case. Otherwise, it was something like 17 or 18 different cases purchasing equipment for their nuclear weapons program, their ballistic missile program.
Were they related to Mark Rich, the 21 guys? Do we know that yet?
No, they weren't related to Mark Rich.
I mean, the transactions over the years.
No.
Okay.
No. Look, the Commerce Department and Customs are tracking these guys. They know what they're doing.
Yeah,
but
they don't do anything about it.
That are very active. They were doing something. They had 21 cases. They had 21 cases open, and the administration just said, "Oh, that's okay. Let's just let those guys go.
Can they just...
Let's let all those guys go." You had a question, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, there have been some contradictions in the news, some news reports recently, that they were not asked to stand down. There's a lot of things bubbling up about that. What is that all about?
All right, this is a, let me remain polite. CIA Bob, who was the chief of base in Benghazi, by all accounts...
Wasn't he interviewed by the Washington Post or something? He walked in there, this scruffy-looking guy.
I'm getting there. CIA Bob, who by all accounts behaved in a cowardly fashion and an unprofessional fashion during the night of the attacks, refused to talk to the author of 13 Hours, refused to talk to the filmmaker. The CIA would not make him available. He's retired and living in Williamsburg, Virginia, guys, okay, everybody? He's living in Williamsburg, Virginia. I know his neighbor. CIA Bob, all of a sudden, once the movie comes out and shows him in a very unfavorable light, he waves his hand and says, "Hey, Washington Post, I'm here. Let me tell you my side of the story. But it's secret. You can't mention my last name. I'm still undercover, even though I'm retired and not working for the agency." I mean, come on. What is that? That should be so pathetic, so transparent, that nobody should fall for it. And yet, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and ABC, NBC, they all fall for it. Yeah. We are willing dunces, aren't we?
What about Fox News? Where were they?
They were covering the 13 Hours story. Okay, I was actually traveling when this came out, so I wasn't watching Fox News. But Fox News has been very good on with the contractors.
They were told to stand down.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah. No, listen.
Otherwise, they'd be alive.
You know that they were told to stand down because it took them 22 minutes.
Yeah.
To get out of the CIA compound, and they had their stuff in the cars within about 5 minutes.
They jacked up.
And you have the testimony of these 5 guys. All right, you know that. So what are they doing if not stand? Okay, hold in place. You want to talk say it's a question of semantics? Hold in place. All right, hold in place. It means you're not going. They're told not to go. All right? And then finally, they disobey the order. And by the way, people don't know this, so it's not that well known. When they were finally interviewed by the House Intelligence Committee under Mike Rogers, who also was a scurrilous individual, Rogers dressed them down. He said, "You guys didn't obey orders. You know, what's the matter with you? You didn't obey orders. You were told not to go. And you went anyway." Can you believe that? Now we learned, of course, that his wife worked for the company that owned the security guards that failed to protect the compound. Okay.
And Stevens probably died within those 22 minutes.
Absolutely, Stevens died within the 22 minutes. If they had, and I say this in the book, if they had been allowed to go when they were ready, a very strong chance that Stevens and Sean Smith would be alive. Okay, Frank, you have a question over here, then you, sir.
I read most of your book. It's extremely interesting, and you cover a whole range of issues. You mentioned that Chris Stevens had illusions about these Islamists all over the world, and he was very sympathetic to them in some ways. And of course, we know that the administration, as well as the Carter administration, they have been very active in promoting Islamists all over the world and bring them to power. In Egypt, in Libya, in Syria, before that in Iran, and etc. I knew Chris Stevens, a very likable man, very smart guy, but of course we knew that he was sympathetic to these Islamists around the world. Now my question is, why is the administration so active in bringing Islamists to power, in arming them, in supporting them, in covering everything up, and putting them instead of secular governments in the Muslim countries? Why do they really want to do that? I mean, the Cold War is over, the war against communism, when they used religious forces against them, well, basically it's over. So why have they been doing that in the last 20 years?
Well, and especially especially over the past 7 years, with great frequency, they had an opportunity in June of 2009 when 3 million Iranians were on the street holding signs in English, "Obama, are you with us?" And instead of siding with the pro-democracy forces, the administration sided with the mullahs, with the dictators, with the dictators. 18 months later, when you had millions of people in the streets of Cairo, again, chanting for democracy after Mubarak had left, right? Who do we support? We don't support the guy from Google. We support the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
And a dictatorship, the imposition of Sharia law. Those are facts which I lay out in Dark Forces. There's a long sequence of facts like that. It is undeniable that this administration prefers to support radical Islamic regimes, terrorist regimes, than to support pro-freedom or pro-freedom regimes in the Middle East. Now, why are they like that? Why are they like that is harder to explain. It's hard to explain because you're asking me to use logic. You're asking me to use logic to explain something which makes no sense whatsoever for U.S. national security. There is a theory in here. Okay, there's a guy named Quentin Viktorovich who's a CIA analyst whose writings try to find 47 different flavors of jihad and 47 different flavors of jihadi, and 3 of them we like, and 44 we don't. So let's cultivate the three flavors of jihadis that we like that are less violent than the others. And of course what happens is, once we support those less violent jihadis, guess what? They become more violent. And they do exactly the same things that the other guys were doing from the beginning. So that even the theory doesn't work very well.
There's no global strategy, there's no logic behind it, there must be something.
Well, I think
these are not mistakes.
I agree with you. These are not mistakes. This is a consistent policy on the part of this administration. These are not errors. This is not incompetence on the part of the White House. These things did not have to happen the way they did. They were made to happen by U.S. actions or U.S. inaction. What was the overall objective? It's hard to comprehend because it does not sound very pro-American. Yes, sir.
I'm really going off a tangent, but do you have any predictions about the next 5 to 10 years about the political landscapes in the Middle East?
Well, I'm a very American-centered, and I think many people in the Middle East are too, and I think a lot depends on our election. If we have a strong president in the White House, all of a sudden, some of the evil ones go scurrying back underneath the rocks. Look what happened when Ronald Reagan was sworn in. The very minute that he was sworn in as President of the United States, the Islamic Republic of Iran released our hostages. The minute. Not 10 minutes, not an hour, not 2 days, the minute he was sworn in.
But they had a deal already working already.
That's okay. They waited until he was sworn in. They did not do it when Carter was president. So I think a lot depends on our administration, who we have as president. You haven't asked a question, and then back to you.
Actually, this is unfortunately
my questions. I think you say this 8 years, this is all the U.S. really bad.
I can't
Look at the 8 years before you had wars, and I think this administration is just trying to have not wars. He got support from the Europeans to do exactly what he has done, and Europe is actually still supporting him in this mission. So I think your base is a little bit cheap. The problem is this problem has been gone on for 20 years. No one knows the solution. And you can say it is all Clinton's mistake, which could be all Bush's mistakes before. So I think this is very, very one-sided. And the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of people there who just want to live.
Who just want to
live.
Of course, obviously.
So I think just to say this one administration this was really upsetting me.
Yeah, it's
I don't think that the Americans have been so light on in the last 8 years.
Yeah, I think there's a qualitative difference between the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan and what we've seen since 2009. Correct. A qualitative difference. You are absolutely correct that the Europeans supported us in Libya. Absolutely right. The French, and the British in particular were very supportive of getting rid of Gaddafi. Gaddafi had come to Paris about a year before the war began, and he refused to buy Rafale fighter jets. And Sarkozy was very, very eager to sell him a couple $2 billion worth of Rafale fighter jets, and Gaddafi didn't buy. And I was told by some pretty senior French officials, if Gaddafi had spent a couple €1 billion while he was in Paris, he would still be alive and still be in power. Exactly. So,
what happened to the Shah of Iran?
Leaders in Europe often have venal motives as well. I don't think that's the case with President Obama. I don't think he was venal. I don't think that's what's behind it. I think it is an ideology on the part of the president, and it is a very different ideology than the one of President Bush. And the wars were qualitatively different as well.
I'm sorry. It's enlightening and interesting talk, but unfortunately our time is very, very limited.
Discussion.
I want to hear more. I'm sure audience have many more questions.
Come and buy the book. I have the book here.
Exactly, we can find more from the book.
I have my book on Iraqi Christians as well.
And,
thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Ms. Jasmine Shomelian to present the certificate from the city.
On behalf of the City of Los Angeles, I'm from Councilmember Kratz's office. Yes, I want to present the certificate of appreciation to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to read it out loud, if you don't mind. The City of LA salutes and celebrates your longtime advocacy of humanitarian work. Your tremendous dedication and unwavering commitment to those in need is much appreciated. We thank you for your excellent service and accomplishments in securing a more just and tolerant society for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So whoever is interested in buying books are here. Please, our great librarian. This is the time that we all usually give the book to the library.
Yes. Oh. Yes, we have books to the library too, yes.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you coming. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming here. Those who are interested to join a Chamber of Commerce, today we have a special discount. Whoever wants to join us, you can go to Molly. She has applications and any information that you need, she can provide. Thanks again for coming.
Is anyone using parking dollars?